Hello everyone! I've been on a role-playing binge lately, or rather on a binge making character builds, because finding a stable group is a nightmare, and I decided, you know what, if I'm gonna work on this, I might as well make it a project for a YouTube video. So here we are. One of my favorite systems is Pathfinder 1st Edition, as it is a huge, extremely developed system where the big appeal is that you can make pretty much any kind of character you can think of. One of the most common tropes I see people wanting to play is that of the necromancer with the ability to raise legions of undead, something which Pathfinder 1st Edition actually supports. This is through the spell Animate Dead. This spell exists in multiple other systems and settings, but in Pathfinder 1st Edition it is, depending on your dungeon master, a horribly broken spell even without much optimization. It is not only potentially extremely overpowered, but also horribly complex and a nightmare for a dungeon master to deal with. How does the spell work? How can we optimize it, and what kind of improvements can we suggest? That's what we'll discuss in this video. First of all, how does it work? Animate Dead is at first glance a pretty typical spell. It is level 3 for anti-paladins, clerics, oracles and shamans, while being level 4 for sorcerers and wizards. It is from the necromancy school and has the evil descriptor. It has a casting time of a standard action and uses verbal, somatic and material components. It's with the material components we see the first extraordinary part of the spell. It costs 25 gold pieces worth of onyx gems per hit dice of the creature that you're animating. If you're animating multiple corpses, you pay for the total hit dice of all creatures combined. It is a touch range spell that can target any number of corpses. It takes effect instantaneously and allows for no saving throw or spell resistance. Corpses targeted can be raised as zombies or skeletons, as well as a few specialized form of undead. Skeletons require that the corpse or corpses have bones, while zombies require that the corpse or corpses are mostly intact and have some sort of physical anatomy. For this specific type of undead, it depends on those types of undead, but most of them have the same requirements as a zombie, but with extra requirements. You can raise up to twice your caster level in undead in one casting, and any undead you create this way are permanently under your control. However, you cannot control more than 4 times your caster level in undead. These undead will follow your spoken commands, such as following you around or to stay in place and guard a certain area, but they are mindless and thus have no ability to interpret orders critically. These are the basics of Animate Dead, but let's dive into these and look at some of the details that are important to understand how the spell works. First, the material cost. Having to pay this much gold in material costs is kind of weird for a relatively low-level spell, but it's not unheard of, and I'd argue it's necessary to balance the fact that you can get free permanent minions by just using a spell slot, and not even a very high one at that. The material required is also onyx gems, which is again an interesting detail. It is a touch range spell, and per the wording of casting touch spells that have multiple targets, you must touch all intended targets until the end of the turn in which you cast the spell. The rules also put an upper limit of 6 creatures per casting of such spells, but corpses are not considered creatures but objects for the purpose of most effects, so we can safely waive that rule. As such, the smartest solution when you want to animate a large number of creatures to put under your control is to make 1 or more corpse piles before casting Animate Dead, so you can touch all the corpses you need in one round. Next, you can animate up to twice your caster level in hit dice worth of undead at once, but you can control up to 4 times your caster level. This is where we come to a concept veteran Pathfinder players will refer to as buckets. Basically, there's multiple ways to create and control undead, and each of these methods has its own limit on how many undead you can control with them. When those limits are separate from one another, you can call it a bucket. Animate Dead, for instance, is its own bucket, as undead you create with Animate Dead end up in your Animate Dead bucket, which is filled only with undead you can create and control with other castings of Animate Dead. In other words, if you have a caster level of 10, you can create 20 hit dice of undead at once, but you can control up to 40 hit dice worth of undead with your Animate Dead bucket. If you cast Animate Dead again to animate another 20 hit dice worth of undead, you now have 40 hit dice of undead in your Animate Dead bucket. If you cast it again, raising another 20 hit dice worth of undead, you now have 60 hit dice worth of undead in your Animate Dead bucket, and you have to let 20 hit dice worth of undead go free in order to meet your bucket limit again. This is not optional, but you can pick and choose which undead to release if you animated too many. If, however, you have the Command Undead feat, you can use it to enslave and control an amount of undead equal to your hit dice. If you're level 10, as in our previous example, and you already have 40 hit dice worth of undead under your control through Animate Dead, you can hypothetically use Animate Dead to create another 10 skeleton peasants, preferably in a cage, and choose to release them from your control to avoid overfilling your Animate Dead bucket. You can then use Command Undead on the skeletons inside the cage, and if they all fail their saving throw, you now have another 10 skeletons under your control, as the Command Undead feat has its own bucket separate from your Animate Dead bucket. It is also important to mention that released undead do not disappear, unlike summoned creatures. They are permanent creatures who follow your orders to the letter until they are destroyed. Unless they are somehow released from your control, such as when you die, in which case they will then engage in the usual mindless undead behavior of wandering around and hunting and killing any living creature that they see. So that wraps up the basics of the spell. However, now the next question is, how does turning a creature into a skeleton or zombie actually work? That leads us to the next topic, Undead Types. There's actually a surprising number of different undead creatures you can create with Animate Dead, and we'll explain these in the next chapter. To start, we'll dive into the most well-known undead types you can create, and then move into the lesser-known undead types. But first, allow me to explain how creating undead works. The easiest type of undead to create are non-templated undead. This means things like ghouls, Dullahan, or banshees. These creatures, regardless of the corpse they were created from, have their own stat block. However, when using Animate Dead, the majority of the undead types you can create are templated undead. This means that you take that creature's stat block and apply a specific undead template to it. In order to demonstrate how this works, I'll apply the Humble Zombie template to a red dragon. First, this will change the red dragon's type from a large dragon with the fire subtype into a large undead with the fire subtype. Some subtypes are not retained, but these are only ones that are alignment based or based on the type of creature that it is. So a troll with the humanoid type and the giant subtype would lose the giant subtype if it becomes undead. Its alignment gets set to neutral evil, regardless of which alignment it used to have. If the red dragon had any class levels, it loses all of them. Ergo, if this used to be a red dragon with 2 levels in wizard before its death, it now turns into a regular red dragon with no class levels. However, the red dragon does gain 2 extra hit dice for being a large zombie, which you use to recalculate its hit points, base attack bonus, and saves. Note that for most playable races, this effect will leave you with a 1 hit dice creature even if it was previously a level 20 fighter. The red dragon's racial hit dice also turn into a d8 if it wasn't one already, which in the case of the red dragon significantly reduces its total hit points as it goes from a d12 to a d8. The red dragon also has a new spread for its saves. It now gets 1/3 of its hit dice for its fortitude saves, 1/3 of its hit dice for its reflex saves, and half of its hit dice for its will saves +2. The red dragon also completely loses its constitution score, instead using its charisma score for all things it once used its constitution score for, though it's probably immune to most of those for now. The red dragon also loses its intelligence score entirely, and both its wisdom and charisma get set to 10. It retains its own strength and dexterity score, but adds 2 to strength and deducts 2 from dexterity. The red dragon's base attack bonus also gets recalculated and is now equal to 3/3 of its hit dice. The red dragon's movement options do not change. It retains its fly speed, though its maneuverability drops to clumsy. If it had a swim, climb, or burrow speed, it would have retained those without changes. The red dragon then loses its innate plus 15 natural armor and instead gains natural armor as per a large zombie, so plus 3. It loses all of its skills and feats, and does not gain new feats based on its hit dice, but it does gain the toughness feat for free and gains damage resistance 5 overcome by slashing. The dragon also loses all of its defensive abilities, special qualities, special attacks, and spell-like abilities. That means that, for instance, it loses its breath weapon and its spell-like abilities. It would normally lose its immunity to fire and vulnerability to cold as well, but because it gains those abilities from its subtype, the fire subtype, it retains those when it becomes an undead creature. It also gains all the immunities and abilities of an undead creature. Some very rare extraordinary abilities can be retained on some creatures, but these are exclusively ones that directly improve the creature's melee or ranged attacks. One of the very few examples I've found of this is the powerful bite ability of the T-Rex. Generally, consult your DM with what constitutes improving melee or ranged attacks, but expect this to come up very rarely, if at all. The dragon also retains all of its natural attacks, and gains a slam natural attack whose damage is calculated as though the dragon was one step larger than it actually is. If the dragon had any weapon proficiencies or manufactured weapon attacks, it retains those too, though short of animating some kind of warrior who has a sword surgically grafted to the stump of their arm, I don't know what kind of creature would have a manufactured weapon attack integrated into its stat block. Finally, it gains the staggered special quality. This isn't like the staggered condition, as its staggered special quality still allows the zombie dragon to charge. And voila! We have created a zombie dragon. Ride it around and inspire both fear and awe into your enemies, while they're not gagging on the smell your new mount produces anyway. Before we dive into specific undead creature types, I will only be discussing undead types that can be created by Animate Dead that were released by Paizo, excluding ones mentioned in third-party materials. I'll also try to avoid giving the entire stat block with every single creature type, and focus instead mainly on the differences between them. I'll give a quick overview of the rules that always apply, but bear in mind, this only applies to Animate Dead creature types, and I'll mention if there's any differences. First of all, non-templated creatures have their entire stat block replaced with that of the new undead creature. Literally just use the stat block provided for the type of undead you are creating without changing anything, except as indicated by their creation rules. Templated undead always apply the following. All class levels and related bonuses, such as hit dice, class abilities, spell likes or otherwise, are lost. The challenge rating of the new creature is adjusted to the number of hit dice it has exclusively, which often won't change their challenge rating, but it might. Its alignment always becomes neutral evil and its type becomes undead. Subtypes are only retained if they're not alignment-based subtypes and only if they're not based on the kind of creature that it is. For instance, a giant with a humanoid type and a giant subtype will lose its giant subtype if it becomes an undead creature, but subtypes related to the elements such as fire, water, or air are not lost. The creature loses all of its defensive abilities. This means its resistances, immunities, fast healing, and otherwise. Its hit dice and its saves are adjusted to those of a standard undead creature. It also loses its constitution score entirely, and now bases its hit points and fortitude saves off of its charisma score. The creature gains all the traits and immunities of the undead creature type. It loses any natural armor it may have already had and instead gains a natural armor bonus per the undead creature type it has become. It retains all the natural attacks, manufactured attacks, and weapon proficiencies of the base creature that are part of its stat block. All of its special attacks are lost. It loses its old base attack bonus and gets the base attack bonus of its standard undead creature. The creature loses all of its special senses, though not its normal ability to see and hear, and gains dark vision out to 60 feet. The creature retains all its movement types and speeds, though flight is affected differently per undead creature type. the new undead creature loses its intelligence score, all of its skill ranks, all of its feats, though it may gain new ones from its new undead form, and all of its special qualities, exempting only special qualities that improve its melee or ranged attacks. Its wisdom and charisma are set to a value of 10, regardless of what the creature's original values were. Now, let's talk about the specific undead types we can create and how they stack up against each other. The zombie is the most recognizable undead minion, arguably. It is one of the better choices for masked, cheap, throwaway minions, as all zombies gain a new natural attack in the form of a slam and gain +2 to strength, significantly improving the damage dealing capabilities of most one-hit dice creatures. In addition, they gain extra hit dice based on size, the toughness feat, and DR5 overcome by slashing, which makes them surprisingly durable against low-level creatures. This makes the zombie ideal if you have a bunch of dead peasants laying around that you want to make more useful. However, the zombie suffers from a distinct but extremely large problem. Zombies all get the staggered special quality, which makes them incapable of making full attack actions. This is not a big issue for most one-hit dice zombies, as most humanoid races do not get natural attacks of their own, and thus will only ever be able to make one attack per turn anyway. But once you start getting the corpses of trolls, dragons, or krakens, all creatures that already have natural attacks of their own, you never want to raise them as a regular zombie, as they will lose the ability to make multiple attacks per turn. In those situations, you may instead want to raise them as skeletons. Skeletons, while not as tough as zombies, make up for this by being far easier to use. Skeletons gain a +2 to dexterity without losing any points in other ability scores. They get damage resistance 5, overcome by bludgeoning, immunity to cold, and if they were a creature with hands, their hands turn to claws instead. They also get improved initiative as a bonus feat, though this might not come up for you, as most dungeon masters will house rule that all minions and pets act under their master's initiative to help the pace of combat. Other than their immunity to cold damage, skeletons are the ideal choice for large swarming hordes or powerful large monsters with lots of innate natural attacks. The former due to the fact that they don't add hit dice to the creature being animated, which means they take up less space in your bucket than zombies, and the latter due to them not getting the staggered quality, as this makes it so that large monsters that already have lots of natural attacks can use them as part of a full attack action, which zombies cannot do. However, skeletons are generally outcompeted as the choice for strong monsters by more advanced templates, which we'll get to later. One thing to keep in mind is that skeletons do not retain non-magical flight when animated, but zombies do. If you want a flying creature as an undead mount, skeletons should only be considered if the base creature has a form of magical flight, as opposed to powered flight. Finally, it's important to mention that creatures who have more than 20 hit dice cannot be turned into skeletons, and thus by extension not into skeleton variants either. This restriction does not exist for zombies, creating a niche in which zombies are the universal choice of undead. Both skeletons and zombies also have variants of themselves that can be significantly stronger than these base undead types. Note that variants get the same bonuses, drawbacks, and restrictions as their parent template, unless stated specifically that it works differently for them. Burning skeletons are kind of weird, but nonetheless powerful variants of the regular skeleton. Instead of getting immunity to cold, burning skeletons get immunity to fire and vulnerability to cold. They also get a charisma of 12, giving them 1 extra hit point per hit dice compared to a regular skeleton, and get a bunch of fire-related powers. They automatically deal 1d6 fire damage to any creature they start adjacent to during their turns, and to any creature that strikes them with unarmed or natural attacks. Burning skeletons also deal 1d6 additional fire damage on any melee attacks they make, and when they die, they deal 1d6 fire damage to all adjacent creatures for every 2 hit dice they have, with a minimum of 1d6, with a successful reflex save halving the damage. Finally, Burning Skeletons take up twice their hit dice in space in your Animate Dead bucket, meaning a 5 hit dice Burning Skeleton takes up 10 hit dice worth of capacity in your bucket. That is a lot of fire damage. Needless to say, Burning Skeletons vastly outperform regular skeletons in terms of sheer damage output, but only as long as their targets are not resistant or immune to fire. Against those types of targets, Burning Skeletons are basically just the same as regular skeletons, save that they take up more space in your bucket. Needless to say, Burning Skeletons vastly outperform regular skeletons in terms of sheer damage output, but only as long as their targets are not resistant or immune to fire. Against those types of targets, Burning Skeletons are basically just the same as regular skeletons, save that they take up more space in your bucket. It is also important to mention that Burning Skeletons don't play nice with other undead. A lot of the fire damage they cause is involuntary, such as automatically dealing fire damage to anything near them at the start of their every turn and on death to anything near them, which means that hordes of undead with Burning Skeletons mixed in will often suffer from attrition due to the Burning Skeletons causing accidental friendly fire. There's two ways to avoid this. Either use a horde that consists of only Burning Skeletons, or animate only creatures immune to fire. However, this doesn't fix the issue that you yourself might not be resistant or immune to fire damage, which makes Burning Skeletons a poor choice of bodyguard. Where Burning Skeletons are kind of niche damage dealers, Bloody Skeletons are considered the golden standard of undead minions, though, like Burning Skeletons, they cost double their hit dice in the capacity of your Animate Dead bucket. They get fast healing based on half of their hit dice, with a minimum of fast healing 1. They get Shadow Resistance +4 and a flat Charisma score of 14, effectively giving them +2 hit points per hit dice compared to standard skeletons. And they also get the marvelous Deathless special quality. Deathless means that when a bloody skeleton is reduced to 0 of your hit points, it is destroyed, they are revived automatically after 1 hour with 1 hit point. Unless they are destroyed by positive energy, were destroyed in an area affected by a Bless or Hallow spell, or if the remains of the bloody skeleton are sprinkled with holy water. This effectively means you have undead minions that can repeatedly die and resurrect themselves. Plus, bloody skeletons have more hit points than other undead types you can create due to their higher charisma, and because they have fast healing, you don't have to repair them yourself. The fact that having an army of only bloody skeletons effectively halves your Animate Dead bucket won't even bother most necromancers, simply because they never need to replace any of the skeletons under their control. Most of the time anyway. Dedicated paladins or clerics can definitely destroy your bloody skeletons, as can any force that comes prepared to kill deathless creatures. It's just that they'll be fairly rare to encounter. First off, zombie variants are kind of weird compared to the skeleton variants. Skeleton variants just take up twice as much capacity in your Animate Dead bucket, but zombie variants don't, instead requiring only that you must cast an additional spell while using Animate Dead to create them. This might be an oversight, but it also might not be, as unlike the skeleton variants, which are straight up upgrades over standard skeletons, zombie variants lose a few abilities for their new powers. Plague zombies are for necromancers who really wants to start a zombie apocalypse. To make plague zombies, you need to cast Contagion in addition to Animate Dead. Plague zombies spread the zombie rot disease with their natural attacks, including their new slam attack, whose save difficulty is based on the new plague zombies' hit dice. Zombie rot deals 1d2 con damage every day, which can't be healed while the victim is infected. And if they die for any reason while infected, they turn into uncontrolled plague zombies after a few hours. Plague zombies also spread this disease when they die in a burst of decay, forcing every adjacent creature to make a saving throw against their zombie rot. However, in exchange for the ability to spread zombie rot, plague zombies do not get the customary damage reduction 5 overcome by slashing that normal zombies get. Plague zombies are pretty cool, but not very useful. They suffer from the same issue as standard zombies in that they are always staggered and their disease ability is nowhere near good enough to warrant giving up a zombie's damage reduction. Yes, it's fairly deadly as far as diseases go, but diseases as a whole are not particularly dangerous to enemies in Pathfinder, as combat only takes a few seconds to resolve, not days. Might have some interesting uses on a grander scale of combat though. Sieging a city gets a lot more interesting if you can catapult plague zombies over the walls at the defenders. Fast zombies require that you are able to cast haste or remove paralysis when you cast Animate Dead. Fast zombies are a favorite for many necromancers and it's not hard to see why. The biggest reason is that they do not get the staggered quality unlike regular zombies. In addition, they also gain 10 feet of extra land speed. They gain 2 dexterity instead of losing 2 points of dexterity, and when they make a full attack they get to make an additional slam attack, on top of the slam attack that they're already getting from becoming a zombie. This makes fast zombies a superb offensive choice, capable of dealing lots of damage in close combat, but at the cost of not getting a damage reduction 5 overcome by slashing, like a standard zombie. If people want zombies, they're bound to make them fast zombies, as those will outperform regular zombies under almost all circumstances. You know how bugs don't have a skeleton? They do have an exoskeleton, and there's an undead template called the Exoskeleton specifically made to deal with those types of creatures. The Exoskeleton gets some of the best of both of the zombie and skeleton templates. They also get a number of extra hit dice based on their size, damage reduction 5 overcome by bludgeoning, and the toughness feat, making them relatively durable. They can still fly, though their maneuverability drops to clumsy. They gain a slam attack that deals damage as though they were a size larger, and they gain 2 strength, generally increasing the damage output of the base creature. They also retain any special attacks that did not rely on their biology, which may be rare, but it's still more than most of the other templates will give you. In addition, they also gain the burst ability, which makes it so that when an exoskeleton is destroyed, it explodes into a burst of rotting dust, so that any creature with the exoskeleton that must breathe to survive must succeed at a fortitude save or be staggered, unless the exoskeleton had 10 or more hit dice. Then they are nauseated instead when they fail the save. Exoskeletons are generally superior to zombies or skeletons unless they are variants. But creatures that can be turned into exoskeletons cannot be turned into skeletons or vice versa, so those two templates cannot compete with each other. Exoskeletons also get no variants, and I'd argue that the fast zombie can easily outdo an exoskeleton creature of similar hit dice. Hey everyone, I'd like to apologize for the lackluster audio quality on this video series. After my desktop got fried and after I moved to a new house, I couldn't get the quality better than this. Parts 2 and 3 are already recorded, so they'll be up soon. Thank you all for watching.